with our presentation today. Our group has been working on a grain elevator dust collection systems for United Ag. The team, we consist of it's Cameron Berger, myself, Jacob Lent, and Ian McDonald. Um, there we go. We're going to be going over multiple aspects of the project of kind of where we're at, where we're going, and what we need to do. We're going to start off with our project purpose, our project history, background report, what we've accomplished so far, what we're doing now, and that's still changing every day as we're working on this, whether that be communication with our client or communication with the team. And then what we need to do based off of decisions of the client, what the engineering design team has come up with, and kind of what we believe would be the best option for the client as far as budget constraints and kind of their idea of everything. And then we'll finish off with our conclusion, and if y'all have any questions for us. So our project purpose, we've been asked to design and develop a dust collection system for United Ag Co-op grain elevator, but more specifically for their unloading pit. We did ask Stephen, that's who our client is, if they would like to have us design a system for a cyclone or multiple cyclones. But he said that he wanted us to go ahead and just focus on the grain unloading pit. And really, what that entails is, as a truck comes over the pit and unloads its hopper into the system, there's a lot of dust that gets separated from the actual grain, and that's where most of the dust pollution comes from, at least in that part of the grain elevator. So, what we're trying to do is we're trying to really reduce that initial that first part of the emissions, and then in doing that, it will increase operation or decrease operation and maintenance cost of the current system. And really, the big thing for grain elevators across the nation is that anytime they have a change in something, they're trying to make it to where it adheres to current standards, and if not exceed future standards that will be more stringent. That way, they don't have to invest more money 5 years from the road, say. United Ag, they've been operating since 1982. They've made multiple projects and leaps to adhere to current and standard regulations. And they've been really on top of the ball as far as making sure that their current standard will also adhere to future guidelines as well. And as you can see in this picture, this is actually our engineering team. They went and did a site visit, and that's the actual unloading pit where our proposed design will come into play there. So truck will actually drive over exactly where they are, and that's where it'll unload its hopper. And while it's actually operating, that whole area is just solid dust, so you actually have to wear a mask and everything like that, or it's really difficult to breathe. And then that will travel throughout the whole system. Cameron's going to go ahead and go over some of the constraints and regulations. So here you go, Cameron.
Sure. So some of the things that we're working around and keeping in mind throughout our project are listed here. Kind of Tristan touched on some of this before, but there's the obvious industry and governmental federal standards and regulations that this elevator constantly is having to work with, and those are constantly changing, as mentioned. He also touched on that our client wants to make sure that what we're suggesting being implemented is, not only as effective as what they're working on now, but hopefully, more effective. But at the very least, that if they're investing this money, that it's going to be as effective as what they have currently implemented. This number below this 5,000 to 10,000 range, this was something that Stephen Craig loosely that sent us about, they want us to make sure we're cost effective, and that this is a range, 10 being on the high end, that they would like us to stay in when we're, trying to come up with some ideas for them at the elevator. And this is a quote. He said that they want a low cost solution that could be implemented on most dump pits. So this technology that we're suggesting to them could potentially be utilized in other areas, and maybe some of their second elevator in another location, not just their El Campo site. And as Tristan also kind of touched on, Stephen Craig and our Bain engineers reminded us that the cyclone is something that they don't want us to move forward with. And that's kind of a new emerging technology. So it was good that this was, nipped in the bud, that that's not something that we're going to be looking into. They said that there actually is already one that's being utilized in the El Campo area on their current site, but that it's undersized and they're already upgrading it. So considering that their sizing is changing constantly and these regulations are constantly changing, they just don't think that that's something that is financially feasible for them to move forward with. So we're scratching that off of our list already. So as we've been mentioning, there's a lot of state, local, and federal entities that are regulating the emissions and coming from this elevator, and that's really the driving force in this project. So some of them, just to touch on, that we are constantly keeping in the back of our head with every step of the way, as far as making sure that this implementation that we're bringing forward to United Ag is consistent with these regulations. The first one is occupational safety and health standards. This is OSHA, specifically subpart R. Just it's actually specific to grain handling facilities, and really what it touches on is just that companies have to have some sort of thing like implemented within their facility that is helping with these emissions, making sure that they're acknowledging and trying to mitigate the release of these dust emissions. There's something it's called a housekeeping program that needs to be documented. This is just ensuring that it's acknowledged that they are working to constantly keep up with the emissions and keep the workplace clean in that sense. And then also it states that somebody needs to do a walkthrough and observe their entire handling system. This is to make sure that any sources of dust emissions are located, and so they can work forward with mitigating this issue, as well as looking to maybe even implement certain things. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, also regulates these grain elevators under a entity called New Source Performance Standards. This just specifies that any permanent grain storage elevators that are capable of holding more than 1 million U.S. bushels, they're falling underneath these regulations and have to follow. And those just state that there has to be an implemented ventilation system for these dust emissions present on that site. And it also has a particulate matter limit that they have to follow that's less than this 23 grams per meter cubed on site. Another regulating body, this is at the state level, this Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, the TCEQ. So while this elevator also has to keep in mind the federal, Texas actually takes it another step further, and so they have to follow these state regulations. So specifically, this is Chapter 11, and this is Rule 111.97 or something that is specific to ag and particulate matter emissions. So below is a table. It's a lot to process. I really just wanted to throw that down because this is the emissions limits based on a weight method as far as the emissions of dust particulate matter. So this is just something that our client probably has to keep on file and follow. And this is something that we're going to be closely following from the TCEQ as far as knowing how much grain is dumped in a day, pounds per hour, and knowing how much dust emissions are allowed at the rate of emission also being pounds per hour. So this is probably one of the bigger things that we're having to follow along with. Going forward from here, Ian McDonald is going to talk to you guys about some of the possible solutions that our team is going to look into.
Okay, so we have a couple different possible solutions. The first of which was brought to us by the bio and ag engineering kids who are also working on this project for their capstone, is sleeve system, which is basically a canvas sleeve that goes around the chute on the bottom of the truck and contains the flow of the grain, so that way none of the dust is able to get out into the open air. Additionally, there is the possibility that we can use a funnel And this can also be used in a system with the sleeve, but the funnel creates a steady column of grain, which in itself contains the dust without the need necessarily for a sleeve. Next slide. And then there's a company that makes dust control baffles, which are basically baffles that open when the grain begins to flow into the hopper and close, sealing off any of the dust that could potentially get out. There's also the possibility for cyclones. I know that United Ag already has cyclones in their system. They don't want to add any more, but for future reference, it is also a feasible option. And Jacob is going to take us home with the status of our project.
Yeah, so let's kind of jump in as to, and talk about what we've accomplished so far. So as a team, we've been able to, we've analyzed and agreed upon a clear purpose for our project. That was kind of step one. It's really important to do just to make sure everyone's on the same page as we move forward. We've established our background research, literature review, constraints, deliverables, and some possible solutions, all within a detailed background report. We've been able to reach out to our client, Stephen Craig, and establish a relationship with him. We've kept in touch with him in order to kind of exchange some ideas and questions and any and all the concerns that we had pertaining to the project. We've also been able to reach out to the engineering team, kind of check in to see where they're at as far as, what are some solutions that they might have already come up with, and kind of see just where their heads are at and kind of the ideas that they have about the project in general. We've also been able to reach out to our faculty advisor. And really kind of lastly, a more important thing that we've done is we've assigned roles within our own team. So, each of us has been assigned the responsibility for at least, one of the 4 reports that we're expected to create throughout the entirety of this project. So that's kind of some of the things that we've been able to accomplish so far. Kind of moving in as to, what we're doing now. So right now we're focusing mainly on perfecting our background report. We're taking the necessary steps in order to, review what we've kind of are missing and really dive deep into some more, additional literature sources that will help us further our knowledge of grain elevator and loading pits and, how air pollution plays a role within those systems. We're also looking for possible solutions still to our project's problem. These being solutions that have already been implemented in some other companies within the industry, possibly, or solutions that, have only been put into theory as of right now. And we're also planning for the future. So by that, I mean, we're also researching all the inputs and outputs that are involved within a grain elevator unloading pit, because that'll definitely help us out whenever we begin our next report. So that's kind of where we're at right now and kind of what we're focused on mainly. So now I'll go ahead and get into as to what still needs to be done and what we still need to do. So obviously, what's really important, probably the most important thing to do is we need to continue reaching out to our client and engineering team when needed. It'll be important to continue building a relationship with them in order to develop the best possible solution for United Ag. So we will need to create and finalize a copy of our background report. Obviously, we'll need to begin and continue any of the research that's needed in order to write our remaining reports. And, obviously we will need to still write those reports that we still have left and include all the material that's expected from them. So to kind of wrap everything up and conclude today, let's see here. Yeah, so we feel that, we're in a good place and we're on the right track. We've established a draft for our background report. We've had a strong understanding of our project's purpose, its history, constraints, regulatory bodies, and some possible solutions already in development and in the works. So, we've been able to reach out to our faculty advisor, our client, and the Bain team. We're on good terms with everyone right now, and we're eager to continue building those relationships and see where that leads us. After speaking with our client and kind of hearing his thoughts about the engineering team, and then checking in with them ourselves, we've decided to continue working with them as we move forward with the project. So that's one thing that we've kind of established, and then ultimately, we're excited to see where this project will take us. And currently, right now, we're focusing on critiquing our background report the best that we can. So with that, do you guys have any questions for us today?
Okay, thanks. I see Stephen Craig out there on the Zoom.
Yes, sir. Made it on here.
Hello, Stephen. How are you doing? For those
Oh, doing all right. Doing all right. Trying to stay ahead of everything. We got I got about 40 projects that I'm submitting to the board next Wednesday, so I've been a little bit tied up lately.
well, thank you for taking time this morning and also to work with this team. Steve is an
Absolutely.
excellent management graduate from class of 2011, and he's been working down there for Jimmy Rocolo and United Ag for a long time. Okay, so what I'd like to do next is allow Stephen, the client, to make his questions and comments, and then we'll have the peer team make their questions and comments, and then the faculty. Okay, so Stephen, take it away.
Sure thing. I think like they said, we're on the right track. We haven't had a chance to really meet and discuss a lot of the project in full, so kind of push them to meet with the engineering team to get started and get as much information from them as they can. So looking forward to moving forward. Like I said, next week I've got that board meeting on Wednesday, but after that my schedule opens up quite a bit until April. So I'll have plenty of time to get into the nitty gritty. A comment on the new source standards. This particular facility that we're working on right now is not confined to that standard. However, our Hilgi facility and I guess Danavang facility is going to be rolled into that soon, but those are, those are underneath that standard. So I think in looking at your solution, definitely good to take that into consideration. I like where your head's at on that front. But I would say that in looking at the project, if there's a solution out there that works better and more cost effective for a smaller facility, obviously we want to kind of look at that. When you get to those larger facilities that are subject to that new source standard, it's very, very strict. So they're gonna those facilities on new builds have to put in bag houses and dust pull systems that go through cyclones because there can be zero visible emissions. So right now a lot of our sources are grandfathered in. So any new construction that's put out there has got to have that zero emissions, zero visible emissions met. So something to look into a little further. But this particular facility, where it may handle over 1 million bushels, it only has storage capacity for 350,000. So it is not subject to that standard. So, but other than that, like I said, I think we're on the right track here. Looking forward to working with both teams and see what we can come up with.
All right, thank you, Stephen. All right, team A, want to make Carol's comments and questions. Looking for at least 2 comments, 2 questions, or some mix like that.
Have y'all been able to look into other facilities that are about this size and see what they're doing to solve this problem?
I can go ahead and answer that. Yeah, so this isn't really a new issue that's come up. It's been grain elevators have been updating their systems for decades now. So we haven't really been able to go out and look at a specific example, but there are many examples online that show where elevator facilities have updated their air quality systems and stuff like that. And then since there have been so many, it makes it to where there's a lot of possible solutions, just because it's such a growing technology and growing industry within that aspect, that there's a lot of new technologies out there, new baffle systems, new bagging houses, new cyclones, and all that kind of stuff. So it really makes it customizable. But as far as actually going and looking at a facility like face to face, we have not done that. No. Did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Keep it going. There's 4 of you. That kind of makes it work out.
Have y'all looked into possible vendors for this solution or solutions that y'all are looking at?
We do have a couple. I mentioned the baffle system. There are a couple different vendors that currently make that. In the slideshow, we talked, I talked about the baffles, but I didn't mention that they're made by Dust Control Environments Group, LLC. That's one manufacturer. As far as some of the other possible solutions we have not found anybody that makes the sleeve system. I'm not sure if there is yet. We'll have to look into that more. And as far as the funnel goes, they have funnels that they use for the loading of the trucks. I don't see why we couldn't modify that system to be used for the unloading of it as well. But I don't have any specific vendors for those.
For y'all's standards and regulations, have y'all spoken with your client about possibly getting your hands on the United Ag's standards and policies? In the past, I've done an internship in grain, and every company should have their own policies on hand that their employees should be aware of when handling grain.
I'll address that. I'm sorry, Amelie. I think that I missed a little bit in the middle of that, just from struggling to hear. So what I think I take from that question, and correct me if I'm wrong, are you asking if we asked if United Ag has a specific like standards for United Ag specifically, if they have like listed, I'm trying to, for lack of words, but stuff that they do specifically on site?
Yeah, like their own policies and procedures that they have to follow.
Okay. Yeah, no, we haven't done that, but that's actually a really good idea. And it would just be a quick email to Stephen. So I'll make a note of it. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we've kind of realized that we need to reach out for whenever we finalize our background report, because that's an important part of it.
Anybody else? It's okay to say things like, I really like your presentation. It's a good looking slide. You don't have to go short. Anybody want to try it?
It was, y'all did really good. Y'all feel like y'all have a good handle on what's going on. It did start a little slow, but I think that's probably just because it's the first presentation, but y'all went up to speed and did really good. So I was impressed.
Okay, thank you, Piercine. You read the requirement. Estelle, you want to make comments?
Yes, let's see. I like the introduction. It shows that you really know what the project objectives are. It was very clear to me. I would have liked to see a schematic of the unloading pit because I'm not familiar with grain elevators, so that helps the audience that is not familiar with the system. But even though it shows that you really know what you are talking about, so you did a good job in there. Krista explaining. The picture on the background slide, I like to see the picture, but I just see 3 people standing on that, and it doesn't show me what is the problem. So you need to find a picture that really shows the actual problem you're trying to solve. So that was an issue. Cameron, I like that you really specify the standards. You describe a lot of what it takes for a grain handling facility to function and operate within the law. So that was good. Your slide with the table 3 was too small. I could not see anything so I don't know if you guys can use a pointer in your presentations. It would have helped to highlight one row of the table, and I could not, I lost I was flying somewhere else. I could not pay attention to that table. And then you have table 3 and then figure 2 below that. So I don't know what you had a figure 2 and a table 3. So make sure you present your figures and tables correctly. Something that caught my attention, I think was you, Jacob. Ian, I saw you explain things well, but it was too fast and too short. The possible solutions. Again, a figure of the sleeve. I really don't know what you meant by the sleeve. You have a nice picture of cyclones, but the cyclones are not part of your solution. So I wasn't that interested in that. So figures, if you want to spend a little more time in your section. Jay, could you mention something that you have assigned roles for your team? I was interested in which roles besides writing reports you have divided among yourselves. So I was interested who is working on regulations and policy and who is working on the actual design or setting up and purchasing. That was missing for me. And one last question, you are doing a good job with the engineering team. Are you working parallel to the team or what are you doing different?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question one more time?
What are you doing different from the engineering team? Or if you're just starting from scratch?
I mean, we've talked to them a little bit about their design. Guys, y'all want to kind of help me out on this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your relationship with their engineering team?
Kind of our take with it right now is they're primarily coming up with designs and we're kind of communicating with them and we're coming up with designs as well, just to throw that out to them. And we're just passing ideas around in regards to that matter. But I mean, primarily they've been coming up with, I guess, more realistic designs because also they've been able to talk to Stephen a little bit more in depth as to what he's looking specifically for as far as solutions go.
Okay, thank you. Good job.
Yeah, okay, good job for your first presentation. It was 17 minutes. It was relatively equally distributed among the team members. Ian was only 2 minutes, but you had a really good slide there, Ian. Your slide with the pictures was really a good-looking slide. Your organization of the presentation was good, and I really liked your transitions between the team members. You introduced the next team member, and you didn't leave us hanging on who's who. So that was really well done. Let's see. You all have a good voice and inflection. Nobody was reading the slides. We've had some team members in the past who just read their slides. You were all giving a good presentation style. Tristan, you were a little bit quiet, but we could hear you just fine. Your inflection made it. It's kind of hard to gauge when you're on Zoom. You don't know how loud it's coming across.
Yes, sir. I can use headphones next time that have a microphone. It might kind of help.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. When you're making a formal presentation, and this is semi-formal, you want to have as good a quality as possible. A couple of things. Tristan, your ceiling fan in the background is a little distracting. So for a presentation, you may want to shut that off. Ian, your background is a little bit busy. We can see the company C2 flag and everything. It's just, I know you're proud of that, but nobody really knows what that is. That's okay. Those are minor things. Let me ask you some questions here. First of all, and I know Stephen could probably answer these questions, but I'm asking him to remain silent because I want to see if the team knows these questions. I got your purpose. The dust collection system, make it better, basically is what I got. My question to you is, what is the problem? Is there a problem that the elevator is having that you're trying to solve? I mean, are they out of compliance with the emissions standards or what? Do you know really what the problem is that caused Stephen to want to solve?
I'll take that on. So as we mentioned about the cyclone that's existing at the El Campo facility, they have that present, but he had said that it's undersized and they're currently upgrading it. I think that was probably what moved things forward, was the fact that their technology was expensive because cyclones are on the more expensive spectrum, and it's failing because it's not keeping up. And these regulations and that was something he also mentioned when in the first project description. These regulations are moving, they're changing, and they're getting more stringent, sometimes every year. So I think the problem is that they're spending too much money and they're not getting the responses that they want out of it. This is an older facility. It doesn't necessarily need the up and coming technology. but they need to be compliant with regulations. So I think it's just a matter of the issue is making sure that the money is spent in an economically feasible manner while being compliant with the regulations that are changing.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. That's a good answer. What I take away from that is they haven't been cited yet, but they're trying to be proactive to make sure that they're not. So they want to make sure that they upgrade their air pollution equipment to prevent being cited. Okay, that's good. Let me ask a question of Jacob. You mentioned that you guys are on track. You've done a lot of work. You said that you've done a literature review. I didn't see any slides in here that told me what literature you have reviewed. Could you tell me, could you fill in the gaps there? What have y'all looked at and what have you learned from your literature review?
Yeah, yes, sir. So, I mean, personally, how we divided up this portion of the report, I didn't primarily work on that aspect, so I'm honestly not too familiar
Okay,
with the
somebody else
exact.
want to jump in and answer that?
Yeah, I can go ahead and take that, Colonel McGee. As far as our literature review, a lot of that was just kind of background. It was kind of helping us gain knowledge of the issues and what other elevators are also dealing with and what they're currently going through. It was more of just kind of a history report, I guess you could say, for us. But that's really where we really gained a lot of knowledge, and that's kind of how we were able to convey that, you know, this isn't a new issue. Air quality has been up and changing for the past 30 years. So that's where a lot of the grain elevators have designed new systems, have implemented new systems, and some have even torn down the old facility and completely rebuilt. And you know, United Ag doesn't really want to go that route, so we didn't really focus on those facilities. But we tried to focus on more. It was an older facility. They were just kind of wanting to upgrade it to adhere to current regulations, but then also kind of keep those options open that if they wanted to add something later, they still could in the future.
Okay, thank you. We're about out of time, so I'll truncate my remarks to this. Who's your faculty advisor for this?
Her name is Dr. Katie Stoddard. She is in the BESE department by, I don't know what that stands for. I'm in an environmental class that she heads.
All right, thank you. Let's see, the last question I've got is kind of a process question. I thought it was a bit unusual for your first presentation to talk about potential solutions already. We kind of expected to see more about a literature review. You're gathering information to inform those potential solutions. I didn't see a lot of that presented. You know, I haven't seen a flow analysis yet. So you need to quantify the problem before you start talking about potential solutions. And there's a paper, for example, out there done about 20 years ago by a guy named Brian Shaw. He was a professor in our department. He was the chairman of the Tsz-Yi. So he has some experience in this. We did some research here where they actually measured the dust that was emitted during grain and loading operations at a pit. That's a scholarly article that you may not want to overlook because they actually measure the emissions from truck unloading operations. So papers like that you don't want to overlook. I want y'all to come see me, even though I'm not your faculty advisor. I teach a class in this, so I'd be happy to help advise you a little bit as well. So make an appointment with me next week by Zoom, and we can talk. Okay. All right. Stephen, do you have any other comments? I know you probably need to get back to work.
I do have a couple comments, but I think I'll save them for our meeting. I just sent an email to the team to go over a couple of the cyclone notes. We got multiple cyclones on this site, and I think the one that's being upgraded doesn't really pertain to the pit problem. So, but again, we'll touch base on that within the group, and they can make notes on a correction for the next presentation.
Okay, we need to close this presentation and transition to the next one. So let's take about a 2 or 3 minute break. Stephen, you can get off the line if you need to. You can stick around or if you want to. I'm going to invite the other team to get up here and get y'all's thing ready. Okay, thanks.
Appreciate it. Talk to y'all soon.